2 minutes. 2 minutes and it'll all be over. 2 minutes and all the training and preparation, the confidentiality and concealment, the isolation and seclusion will all come to an end. Everything that I've bled for, everything that I believe, everything that I've fought for, everything that I've lived for, consolidated in this one moment, this one action. Sound familiar? I think it's safe to say that we've all been there before. The climax of our own stories, tension and passion at its paramount. Who hasn't felt the excitement of achieving a long-term goal or getting caught skipping chapel? In this case, however, my intentions were not to reiterate the thoughts of a student at Ridley, but the thoughts of a suicide bomber 2 minutes away from crashing into the side of a building. 2 minutes. As a society, we've collectively decided that actions like this one fall under our collective definition of terrorism. But in terms of an official textbook definition, there are none that stand conclusive or absolute, and so its meaning is left to be determined by its interpreter, you or I. In terms of its origin, terrorism is derived from the Latin word terror, meaning to induce great fear, dread, or panic. So in some ways, you could say that terrorism is making your friend watch a scary movie on Halloween, or the mountain of student loans forced upon you by universities. But no, the connotation so closely associated with terrorism in today's world is politically motivated violence intended to intimidate. And as a society, we've collectively decided that this is wrong. And that, my friends, is where I disagree. Good afternoon, Mr. Kidd, judges, ladies, and gentlemen. Today, I would like to take this opportunity to speak to you about terrorism. Now, before I bore you too much with semantics, allow me to change your perspective. Close your eyes and imagine that you're standing outside of your house on the side of your road waiting for the bus. Close your eyes. Now, while you're waiting for the bus, or when the bus arrives, it comes to a stop a couple of feet too far down the road, and the weight of your backpack makes the climb up the steps feel impossible. But what's so different about your ride from mine is that once you make it up to the top of the steps, you have to sit at the back of the bus. Because you're black! So you take your seat at the back of the bus, all the while you endure racial slurs and the desire to shout back at the kids in front of you. But you know you can't afford the trouble, so you just sit there, kind of like a masquerade, your smile hiding the hatred. Martin Luther King Jr. changed all of this, and at the time, he was no more than a great speaker and a terrorist. Because of King's role in advocating for the rights of African Americans in the United States, he was considered a threat to national security and was under the intensive surveillance of the FBI. Similarly, Nelson Mandela, who participated in both peaceful and non-peaceful methods of protest, worked to bring an end to apartheid in South Africa and was consequently imprisoned. In both cases, these men were deemed terrorists by their respective governments, and perhaps many citizens of their country as well. These people that we deem terrorists sacrificed their own personal safety and well-being to fight for not only personal liberation, but the freedom of the people whom they represent. Ask yourselves, where would we be without those who have fought for our own freedom? Where would we be without our own terrorists? Once again, I'd ask that you take a step outside of your own realm of solace and comfort to take on the perspective of another. Imagine that you've been living in a country for your entire life, when suddenly it's invaded by the military forces of a country on the other side of the planet. Your government tells you that these people who have invaded your home are evil. Their accusations are unchallenged, so you have no choice but to believe them. All the while, you cannot truly know for yourselves whether their intentions are for good or no. Think of a boy from Iraq. To him, the Iraq War and the invasion of his country would have been a form of terrorism in its own right. Conversely, think of a boy from the United States. To him, the attacks on the Twin Towers would have been deemed a form of terrorism. The only difference being that the former case is one that we cannot understand, but that is equally meritable and inconveniently true. Our nations claim to combat terrorism, but at their core, the governments of each individual nation hold different ideological principles, and as a result, have differing perspectives. And there we can find that terrorism is simply a product of difference in perspective, and that in combating terrorism, we become terrorists. Therefore, terrorism cannot simply be cataloged as immoral or unethical. As stated by Spock, science officer aboard the USS Enterprise in the 1982 Star Trek film, The Wrath of Khan, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Just a couple of pages in any history textbook will demonstrate how the lives of so many innocent civilians were disregarded in battles for freedom. Therefore, the reasoning employed by the great leaders of our past is no different than the reasoning employed by the terrorists of today. And if both can understand and justify the cost, consequences, and benefits of their actions, and in the extreme cases, save more lives than they bring an end to, why should terrorism be wrong? It's all a matter of perspective. To Martin Luther King, his actions were to liberate. To the US soldiers in Iraq, their actions were to protect. To the hijackers aboard American Airlines Flight 11, all we can truly know for ourselves is that everything that they've bled for, everything that they believe, everything that they fought for, everything that they lived for, was consolidated in one moment, one action, just 2 minutes away. 2 minutes.